I've been asked to speak today a little bit about our rock formation that we have here in the campus, in the heart of the quadrangle. It was actually designed by Mark Heber, who's the landscape architect at Harley Ellis Devereaux, who designed the Student Services Center. One of the things that Mark had in mind in the design of this was to find a way to represent knowledge, overcoming ignorance over time, and that's the basic theme behind it. If you look at the large rock in its rough stage before it was cut and polished on the interfaces, it represents the ignorance or the lack of knowledge. The arc that's in the brick, that's in the pattern on the ground all around the face of the clock, represents the carving of knowledge through ignorance over time. The time is represented by the 12 rocks around the perimeter of the face of the clock.
When I saw this rock garden that is around us, which we'll refer to as the rock clock, I was very impressed, and I saw a geological formation that in my mind represented a mid-oceanic ridge. And I saw these big black basalts, which are lavas formed by lava flows, and these lava flows actually exist on the seafloor on what we call the MidAtlantic Ridge. And as this lava pours out the bottom of the seafloor, it builds itself up higher and higher, and eventually as it becomes volcanic, it's all volcanic, and these volcanoes literally split and start spreading. And this is what we refer to as seafloor spreading. And this is due to plate tectonic forces that are working deep under the seafloor and causing the seafloor to spread and take these basalts or these lavas to the sides. So as when I came to campus and I saw this rock clock, as we're going to refer to it, I saw something totally different than Mr. Veryser saw in his explanation of education slicing through ignorance. And that's really quite an interesting abstract concept, and it's kind of nice. But what they didn't realize in their plan for this rock clock was that it turned out to be, just coincidentally, an incredible representation of a geological formation that we'll refer to as a mid-oceanic ridge. We're going to start right here at the beginning with this big rock, which is about a 13-ton basalt. And notice that it has been cut and polished on the inside, and it's steaming. And that's exactly what happens at the ridge, any mid-oceanic ridge that has a rift zone in it. And a rift zone is what happens at a mid-oceanic ridge when the seafloor spreads. And so what I'm seeing here at this rock clock in the middle of the LTU quad is a mid-oceanic ridge which is going through seafloor spreading. And we can see it starting on the far side over here, where this basalt has been sliced and it has a rift in it, and it continues right on through the center, through the great big 13-ton boulder in the center, and continues to the far side. If you look over there, you will see it's split just as well, so that we have a mid-oceanic ridge that's undergoing seafloor spreading right here, okay? And this crack represents the place where the center drops out and blocks of lava drop and create what we call a rift zone. And in that zone we have gases emitted from the lavas that are pouring out of the seafloor, and these gases usually include water, carbon dioxide, and a few others as well. Okay, now what I see here is a mid-oceanic ridge, and on the sides of this ridge are older blocks that are on the sides that have been pushed away from the center of the ridge by seafloor spreading. And seafloor spreading occurs when magma from down in the mantle rises toward the center. Some of it cools before it reaches the surface and forms a coarse-grained igneous rock called gabbro, which is a ferromagnesian mineral. It's black we'll go over here on this side and take a look at some of these bricks. If we can get a picture of the bricks that are running underneath the ridge, we can see that they're very coarse textured. And coarse textured igneous rock usually occurs when the magma is cooling underground, before it gets out and into the surface where it cools fast. Now, on the other hand, all of the other rocks here, the 12 rocks in the rock clock and this central rock, are all basalts. And believe it or not, that just turns out to be coincidental with the architectural design that was placed here, but it's coincidental because that's what all the rocks in the mid-oceanic ridge are composed of. Dark, black, fine-grained basalts. And those are the rocks that form where the magma gets out of the, melts right through the seafloor, and it gets out and it makes lava flows, builds up higher and higher, it emits gases into the ocean, and then splits and spreads in the form of seafloor spreading. Okay, so what Dave Thomas is seeing here as a geologist, and believe me, I had no intent and I had no plan in this, because I came in years after it was developed, and I wish I was part of the planning, because we could have made it a little more geological perhaps, but nevertheless a great coincidental project evolved from an abstract plan into a scientific plan that, in my mind, I would tell my students, represents somewhat of a model of a mid-oceanic ridge, in which we have the gases emitted, we have older rocks pushed to the sides, we have the right kinds of rock, we have basalts that form as the lavas when that magma erupts at the ridge, and furthermore we even have the proper bricks here, these dark black coarse-grained gabbros, which usually are found below the mid-oceanic ridge in a little lower part of the ocean crust, okay, just below the ridge. So we've got a whole lot of beautiful things going on here, and in my mind, I want my students to think of this rock clock as a mid-oceanic ridge. Okay, now that summarizes part one of what I see as a geological formation. There's a second stage to this that I'd like to describe while we're at it. And the second stage has to do with the fact that all of these boulders came from the Upper Peninsula. This large one here is 13 tons by itself. These smaller ones here might be as much as 1 ton or a little less, half a ton, something like that. In any case, they're very large, they're very heavy. But what's also true of those is that they're glacial erratics. And so I want to talk a little bit about what happened here to these rocks before we even brought them to make the rock clock. And that is, they were picked up, they were literally plucked away by the glacier 1 million to 2 million years ago. Nobody really knows for sure, but sometime during the Pleistocene epoch, and then carried along inside of the ice, where they were ground down and abraded and striated and grooved by other rocks and sands that were inside of the ice. Now that ice was very thick. It wasn't like you think. That ice was nearly 2 miles high. So over 10,000 feet, for example, if we looked up into the sky today and looked at the clouds, the ice would be that high, staying right here in Michigan, about 10,000 feet high. Now inside of all of that ice are a lot of rocks that have been plucked away by the glacier. So let's go over here and take a look at what the glaciers did to these boulders as they were being carried along for thousands of years inside of the ice. Now right here, for example, I want to point out several different characteristics that form to a boulder that is inside of a glacier. First of all, if we can get a camera view of the very front of this rock, okay, we will see a point. Sometimes these rocks are referred to as bullet-shaped or arrowhead-shaped, but what this point really represents right here is the front of the boulder where it was impacting other rocks that were in the way. And as it was moving into these other rocks inside of the ice, it was wearing this point away. Okay? You might think of it much like we build boats today. We always build the bow of the boat to a point, don't we? Because it's going to cut through the water faster, there's less friction there. And that's exactly what happened here to the front of this big boulder. That's one characteristic. Second characteristic is that it's flattened. Glacial rocks get flattened when they rub against other rocks. Unlike rocks on beaches. Rocks on beaches are rolled over and over, back and forth as the waves come and go. So those rocks are a little different than glacial rocks, which have not been rolled over back and forth, but instead have been flattened by rubbing against other rocks. Now, if we take a good look at this surface, I think we can get a good angle on it. We can see several grooves and striations running in this direction. Those grooves and striations were actually formed when other rocks were rubbing or grinding against this boulder inside of the glacier. And in doing so, they form what we call glacial grooves. Okay? So this surface has been flattened by the abrasion and polishing of the sands and rocks inside of the ice, and created all of these grooves and striations that are on the surface. There's a beautiful polish right here on this backside where we can see some very fine striations just smoothing right on down the backside here on that boulder. So in conclusion, what we have just done is studied the LTU rock clock in two stages. One, an example of seafloor spreading, and secondly, one in which we see what the glaciers did to these boulders that we plucked out of we actually trucked out of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Hey, thank you very much for watching.